Okay, are we ready to start? So welcome to the Leading Through a Pandemic series of transformation webinars. This is a new series of live conversations trying to make sense of these unprecedented times that we're in, how we adjust and survive, how we navigate and move forward together. When we're doing this the only way we know how, which is by having wise experts come on, talk to each other, listen to each other, and learn from each other. To all attendees, please send your questions to this link. We will be taking questions in the second part of this webinar. You can either scan the QR code on your screen now or go to slido.com and type post-COVID-19 to ask questions. Yeah, can you see this? Can you see the slide? Okay, so please send your questions to this link. Scan the QR code on your screen now or go to slido.com and type post-COVID-19 to ask questions. And now I'd like to welcome our panel of experts today. First, we have Mr. Ravi Sehgal, Chairman of the Engineering Export Promotion Council of India, EEPC. Mr. Sehgal is also editor of the Indian Foundry Journal, and he sits on the National Executive Committee of the Indian Foundry Association. Mr. Sehgal is Managing Director of Carnation Industries Limited and has close to 40 years experience in foundry, castings, and engineering, manufacturing, and exports. Next, we have Mr. Tiong Kee Hock, President of the Malaysia Automation Technology Association, MATA. Mr. Tiong is also actively involved in the Machinery and Equipment Productivity Nexus, leading the work group on talent and manpower development. Mr. Tiong is Managing Director of Omron Electronics Sdn Bhd with over 35 years experience in the field of instrumentation, control, and industrial automation. From the Malaysian engineering sector, we have Mr. Richard Teh, Vice President of the Malaysia Foundry and Engineering Industries Association, FOMFIA, and President of the chapter in his own state of Penang, PENFIA. Mr. Teh has been instrumental in bridging working relations between government authorities and members of the industry. Mr. Teh owns several businesses specializing in pumps, valves, and construction equipment in Malaysia, Australia, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Thailand, and has over 32 years experience in the engineering sector. From the Malaysian machinery and hardware sector, we have Mr. Lee Kim Lai, President of the Selangor and Federal Territory Machinery Merchants Association, SAFMA. Mr. Lee is Director of Kim Thai Welding Supplies Sdn Bhd with over 30 years of experience in the M&E sector. And last but not least, our colleague from across the causeway, Mr. Colin Koh, past President of the Singapore Industrial Automation Association, SIAA. Mr. Koh is co-author of Industry 4.0, Navigating the Manufacturing in ASEAN, and provides mentorship and advisory services, especially focused on regional SMEs, implementing digital transformation in line with emerging Industry 4.0 concepts. Mr. Koh has over 30 years experience in industrial IoT. So welcome, gentlemen. Let's begin with a quick review of how the M&E and ESS sectors have been impacted in your respective countries. Let's begin with a scenario in India. Mr. Sehgal, over to you.
Thank you, Lorella, and a good evening to everyone in Malaysia, in Singapore, and of course, India. It's indeed a pleasure to be a part of this seminar discussion. Basically, we are all going through very challenging times. And as someone said, that these are VUCA times, you know, very volatile, very uncertain, very chaotic, and very ambiguous, you know. And actually for the MSME sector, you know, the micro, small, and medium industries, I think it's a learning experience because everything is happening for the first time in our lifetime, you know, I mean. So as you know, the Indian government had called for a lockdown way back in end of March. And we have gone through the whole month. In fact, we have just completed 30 days of lockdown. And this lockdown included all the industries, except for those which are making emergency goods like the masks, ventilator, agricultural part. The tea plantation was given some relief. But basically, from the engineering point of view, all the engineering goods items were stopped unless you are manufacturing for agriculture, defense, or something which is of vital importance to the nation. This closure has suddenly put everything on a back seat, because when I speak on behalf of the Engineering Export Promotion Council, the exports plunged, in the month of March by almost 43%. And in April, I mean, we have no data at the moment, but I know the exports are going to be just minimum, minus 5% of what they should have been actually for the month. So these are things which are going to be very challenging. How to restart? The government has given us an opportunity, a window to restart, but there are so many hiccups and hassles because the public transport is not working and because a lot of permissions which are required, and a fear that in case a COVID patient is found, even after you start, they're going to shut down immediately and put it on quarantine for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So under these circumstances, we are going through very tough times, but one thing we have learned very good is that even though there has been social distancing, digitally we've become very close. The whole world, the globe, we are interacting with our customers, we are interacting amongst ourselves, we are interacting with the government of India, almost on a twice a week basis, to tell them about the ground realities and hear from them about their policy changes. Well, these are my opening remarks, and we'll of course have more discussion further on. Thank you very much for inviting me to this forum.
Thank you, Mr. Segal. Now let's hear from Mr. Koh on the scenario in Singapore. Mr. Koh?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Friends from the region. I think you know that Singapore is a very small economy, right? I think in terms of population and also the size of the lands, we are actually a city stage. But I think we feel the impact. In fact, for myself, I think I've gone through a few crises, economic crisis in the last 30, 40 years. I think 1997, financial crisis, and also the SARS period and .com and kind of thing. But I think the impact, this trial, I think is very huge. I think it's almost impacting all the industries. As you know, I think Singapore is a very open economy, right? So I think we encourage a lot of trade with all over the world. And I think connectivity for us is one of the very major advantage that we are still able to do business with all over the friends around this region and the global. But I think if you look at in terms of the impact, I think there are twofold. One is the big company and the other is as an MNC. I think big company, a lot of them, I think they are in high-tech industry. So for instance, semiconductor, pharmaceutical, oil and gas. These are so-called industry which is because of their technology that they deploy, they have to continue operating. So actually, our government actually put them under the so-called the manufacturing high-tech. They are still able to operate in the coming months. But the other sector, I think, is SME. I think SME, actually, we have a contribution from SME about 50% of GDP. But I think SME actually employs 70% of the workforce. So I think this round, because there are a lot of SME, they are in the supporting industries. So those supporting industry, they support the NMC. I think they are still able to operate because it's of the supply chain, right? Because if the big NMC, they have to operate, they have to rely on a lot of these SME to support them. So I think government have actually put them under the essential service or under the so-called the key industries. But I think nevertheless, I think initially, I think in terms of the number of the COVID-19 so-called patient, I think is quite low. I think the last maybe 2 months, but I think recently we have a big surge I think, you know, the last few days, I think we have almost more than 1,000 numbers. Mainly these are come from the forum, dormitory, things like that. I think government is taking a measure to see how to ensure that the chain will be disrupted, right? So I think we are putting a lot of effort. But I think the government has tried to limit a lot of these non-essential services. And basically, I think Singapore is a very crowded city, right? So I think for this kind of virus to spread, it's quite easy. So I think we have to make a very cautious step in terms of how to control them. So I think you know that the government has just announced we are going to extend our this so-called circuit breaker, right? We call it circuit breaker, extend until the 1st of June. Nevertheless, I think the government is looking at also how to quickly can restart the economy as soon as if we are able to control all these number down. But in terms of business, we actually impacted a lot, especially the SME sector. Yeah.
Okay, so now that so the Indian government is taking proactive steps to stay in communications with the industry, and the Singapore government is also taking steps to ensure the SMEs can survive a little bit while still extending the MCO. Now, how are things comparatively in Malaysia? Mr. Tiong, would you like to begin? Mr. Tiong, you need to unmute.
So thank you, Datin, and good evening to all of you, those audience online, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be present in this webinar. I would say the situations in Malaysia is pretty similar to Singapore. I think a lot of our industries are in fact somewhat quite similar. I would say in terms of I think I would not want to say what has already been known to I think most of the audiences. I think since time is precious, I think I will just go straight to the slide that I have prepared. So I think I must have just say some. So are you able to see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. So I will just go quickly, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'll touch on some of the current status because since we are talking about M&E sector, so I will just focus on my discussion here on M&E sector, and of course, what are the key challenges of SME in the M&E sector, and what is the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Right now, I would say in Malaysia, the current status of M&E sector, first, just an overview of the M&E sector. I would say that this sector, M&E sector, contribute about 9.8 billion to our national GDP. That represent about 0.7%. I think the total number of employees about 213,000. So there are about 1,418 companies involved in this M&E industry, and focusing on power generating, M&E for specific industries, metalworking, general industrial M&E. Of course, the biggest segment actually is the M&E for specific industries as well as the general industry, because like, for example, for those involved in semiconductors are classified under the M&E for specific industries. Of course, supporting the M&E companies are the engineering supporting industries. There are probably about 3,000 plus of companies involved, and those are involved in mold and die, metalworking, machining, metal stamping, surface engineering, heat and heat treatment, and all that. And of course, the other one, which is metal fabrication, is quite big. Many of them involved in metal fabrication, and maybe about close to 2,000 companies involved here, and a lot of them belong to the SME. And of course, among all this, based on the last environmental scan by ILMIA, information given is that more than 50% of these companies actually belongs to the small size company with less than 75 employees. Of course, the key challenges of these SMEs obviously leadership. Of course, they are facing issue of succession plan because I think their second generation are not keen. A lot of them are not keen to take over the business. Of course, they are in the business of very thin margin, and they are very much on cost driven instead of looking at productivity driven. And of course, their process are not very lean. A lot of time, their operations are not efficient. In terms of people, they are very much dependent on foreign labor, and there's not a lot of training even their people. Of course, not to mention also about infrastructure, IT infra is obviously not enough, and they rely a lot of manual input or data, and obviously there's not enough of visibility of their process and what we call operation. So the impact of COVID, obviously, we know it because I think prior to this COVID-19, I think because of the trade war happening between US and China, I think the sector is actually already affected by this trade war, and then business has dropped by between 10 to 20%. So during this MCO 1 and 2, we are actually experiencing that only the tier 1 companies got the approval from ET to operate. Tier 1 companies are referring to the large companies who have got the export business. But a lot of the smaller companies, the medium-sized companies, and of course, even though we are supposedly in the electrical, which is regarded as a supply chain, they were not allowed to operate. So I think many of these SME actually suffered huge loss in their bottom line, as well as they are facing cash flow issue. So post MCO, the way I see it is that because of this change in the whole landscape, we are actually moving into, I would say, that it's unknown, a new norm. People a lot of this new norm, but to me it's very unknown because we do not know what is yet to come. Because I think IMF has said that the global economy is going to, go into negative zone and negative 3%. I think even based on a certain scenario. So I think because of this, I think a lot of uncertain situations. I don't know how bad this can be, but the way I see is that there is a very likelihood that we can see a further drop of 30 to 50% in this business if the global demand don't come back in time. And of course, also I think under this environment, I would say that many of these small companies may not even survive in this COVID impact, because I think this shock is really unprecedented. And of course, based on the latest survey by MIDA among the SMEs, I think in the M&E sector, according to the input, is that about 20 to 30% is expected to be job losses expected, maybe post MCO. All right, so this is what I have to share for Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tiong. That was a very comprehensive overview. So, Mr. Lee, any sharing from the machinery and hardware sectors in Malaysia?
Yeah, very good evening to everyone. I'm Lee, representing Selangor and Federal Territory Machinery Merchants Association, short form SAFMA. COVID-19 indeed is giving all businesses big headache, as all of us know. 6 weeks of MCO and a confirmed extension for another 2 weeks, and maybe another 2 weeks. We don't know when it will end. Not allowing our business to operate during the MCO, whereby company expenses is ticking every day. I'm not surprised. All of us, we are facing difficulty keeping our business afloat. My only hope is that the fourth phase will allow more sectors to open for business. As for machinery and hardware businesses, our greatest challenge when we eventually go back to work is to face company cash flow and payment collection problems. Machinery and hardware businesses in Malaysia are mostly deal in credit terms. The credit norm in our industry is usually 90 days. But in reality, when we receive payments from customer, will be usually over 120 days. Some will drag payment till 150 to 180 days. We, SAFMA, in the past has made a recommendation to our members to shorten credit terms, but without success. I believe this post-COVID-19 will make us to rethink shortening the credit terms. As such, our biggest challenge, as I look at it, will be to collect payment from our customer when post-COVID-19 comes. If we fail to collect payment which were due, this will inevitably post-civil company cash flow. This is my view. Thank you.
Thank you. So that is actually something that I personally didn't think about yet. But okay, so Mr. Teh, any sharing from the foundry and engineering sector?
Yeah, good evening, Datin. Good evening, panelists. And good evening to all the spectators. Well, actually, Datin, Mr. Tiong and Mr. Lee has really taken all the words out from my mouth already. All right. Anyway, because the engineering sector has not been looking good since last year. After the trade war, since the trade war, and also now it's also timing that the COVID-19 has created that the COVID-19 started end of last year, and then you have the Christmas and the New Year's holidays, and then after that January we have all the Chinese New Year, and then after that we have the lockdown from China, created a big shortage in the supply chain, and then now our MCO is even worse now. The MCO is now extended to May 12th. So all this basically has created even more and more issues to especially the SMEs. And basically we can foresee that at least 30% or even more of the SMEs going to shut down. There's already been evidence that's going on that we actually did receive some companies that already declared that they are shutting down their premises. So and then the MCO also has created at least 60% of the export unfulfilled. So and of this export unfulfilled, a lot of cancellations. And also there's a lot of orders that's been delayed even to next year. Even purchase orders this year, they actually transfer it to next year. So and now with all the lockdowns from Europe and the US, we will foresee that it's not going to be good. So whatever the economy is going to bring back up again, I think we'll probably look at next year. So even though even the garment factories in Penang, at least 2 garment factories already shut down, right? Losing about 3,000 to 4,000 workers. So now at this time, it's basically a time of survival. So if the COVID-19 is going to carry on and with longer shutdown, longer MCOs, I think we can foresee a stagflation where you're going to have a negative growth, rising prices, and most of all, very high unemployment rate. And then furthermore, the oil price has dropped to $15 per barrel. This is like adding salt to the wound of Malaysia. So because oil and gas is one of Malaysia's biggest income. So although we have a 250 billion stimulus package from the government, the question is this funds are used correctly to the different sector? And is this helping the industry or the economy during this COVID-19 MCO? So that's a big question mark. Of course, I think Mr. Teo and Mr. Lee would agree to me that the SMEs actually feel that they're very lag behind from what that has been given by the government. But anyway, it's been done. And I only can say that there's a huge dark cloud over the horizon of Malaysia. And seriously, I wish that I'm wrong about this forecast, because we do not see that there'll be anything good for Malaysia until maybe the next year. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Teh. So we did touch a little bit about the effects of the trade war between US and China. Does this necessarily mean that there are opportunities for Malaysians? We'll come to that. For attendees who have just logged in, please send your questions to this link. We will be taking questions in the second part of the webinar. Jenny, could you please? Yeah. So please send your questions to this slido.com. You can scan the QR code or post-COVID-19, yeah, type post-COVID-19. So let's continue. What are the immediate trends we see emerging? So now we have just heard from experts from India, Singapore, and various subsectors of Malaysia. I think we can agree that nothing looks good, right? So immediately, I think everyone is not looking at long-term plans. Everyone is looking at immediate survivability. How do we survive next week, next month, and 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time, right? So what are the trends immediately that we are seeing emerging? What are the SMEs doing to innovate and survive? Purely just for survival. Maybe Mr. Segal, you'd like to share what is going on in India?
Yes, for sure. You know, a lot of things are happening in India. Of course, the government has from the 20th of April allowed the engineering industries and other industries also to start, but subject to them individually getting permission from the state. So all those areas where they're called containment areas or red zones, you know, where the COVID presence is there, they're not allowing any permits and permissions to travel or open anything. But other areas they are, you know, so like in suburban areas or places where the incidence is less. Now, what the MSME sector is doing is at this time preparing itself. I mean, those who couldn't open also are preparing themselves in organizing to buy all the hygiene material, you know, because a lot of spray would be required, hand sanitizers and masks and gloves and whatever, besides working out the living arrangements. Because in India, they've made it that the labor can't travel every day. You have to bring them and you have to keep them in your factory if you can, and then operate. And then the other major issue of safe distancing, you know, because people are used to working closer in the machine shops or even in the, the small and medium scale factories. So they are working out in ways and methods in how they can do the safe distancing, and some of them they are finding it very difficult. So how to take precautions? So we had a webinar only on the health and hygiene standards to be maintained post-COVID startup. So it's not just that it's for a short term, because these plans will run through a few months, because the Indian government has made it very clear that even if you are given permission to start with these conditions, it doesn't mean that after a month or a week they will withdraw these conditions. So wearing of masks, safe distancing, you know, sanitization of the canteen, the public transport by which they have come, or if anybody is coming in their own two-wheelers or whichever mode of transport, has to be sanitized, you know, immediately as soon as they come. So all these different operations are what people are preparing for. But the main issue is the cash flow. You know what, everyone is getting together, giving their opinions. We are sending it to the government, because March we were told to pay off all the salaries, although people worked for only 3 weeks. But the whole month salary was given without any deduction. The government has instructed that you pay for the whole month of April too, but where is the money, you know? Because either the goods are stuck or the goods have been sent, but the money has not been received. And for the exports, you know, there are a lot of containers lying in different states, borders, because the local borders have been sealed for between the states, although now they have opened from 20th. So the cash flow is the main issue, the hygiene control post-COVID, how you start, and of course the training of the every employee and labor in the factory. I think these are the priorities.
So the difference in the new operations to include sanitization and of course immediate cost cutting measures, right, to control cash flow.
Correct.
Right. So Mr. Tiong, would you like to share on your perspective? Mr. Tiong, you need to unmute.
Sorry, it's the same mistake. Hi. In the case of Malaysia, I think obviously we are seeing more online activities, whether through meetings or webinar. I think things like this, where in fact this whole day, I think there were so many webinars being set up, even for the similar to the same industry. So I think obviously webinar is very useful at this moment right now when we are all within MCO period. Of course, people are doing more online purchase. We are using food delivery. So obviously, because of this, it's actually going to change the whole consumption patterns, I think. Surely those discretionary products, I think consumption will surely reduce. So obviously, it may actually cause a disruption to the whole demand in not only in Malaysia, but I think in worldwide. I think it's going to, so which means any product that is discretionary will surely be affected. So the way I see it, of course, the supply chain movement is definitely going to take place. It's just that how soon will this take place? So I think, of course, like Japanese government and American government already giving incentive for their companies to move out of China. So we hope what do you call this? Some of these companies can come to Malaysia. Of course, again, this takes time. So I would say that taking this option, I think our companies here should actually make plans to make what I call invest if necessary in people or in whatever tools necessary in case if this business come to Malaysia, we are ready to catch this business. All right, that's what I can say in terms of, I would say innovation. I didn't see much of innovation right now. I would say it's just more on trying to create more content, utilizing web at this moment to reach out to the customer or of course to provide training to the employee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tiong. So, Mr. Tay, can we hear from you?
Basically, I mean, we can see the SME is the one thing always cash flow. Cash flow has been a problem. So the only way for them is to tightening their belt so that they can survive. So a lot of them are actually cutting wages or cutting workforces. So a lot, or maybe some of them will just shut down and come back maybe when the economy is better. But as I know, quite a number of SMEs that has got the employees that's more than 75 and above are not opting for the EIS, the government assistance salary payment. The reason is very simple. It's actually if they retrench those employees that's more than 4,000 ringgit and above, like for example, they retrench 5, they actually, because they can see that, they can forecast that, maybe 6 months to a year, the business will not be as good. So they'll be having, they will not be having a lot of business. So they actually do not need so many people. So by cutting people, they actually save more money than getting the incentive from the government. So that's why we see that, this incentive actually, I'm not sure whether it was very good, but at least now the SMEs are learning, right, from this COVID-19 that they have to be lean and efficient, right? The most minimum staff to operate the most maximum capacity. Basically, the employees also need to change their work attitude because I'm sad to say that our Malaysian work attitude and the productive efficiency are not fantastic. So they need to change, all right? So SME will actually has to learn that there are too many employees now is actually a burden during the lockdown, like the MCOs. So they have to pay more salaries they have to pay a full salary to all the employees for not coming to work. Therefore, it is time that they actually relook at their operation and see how technology can help them. A lot of them, I think this COVID-19 actually taught a lot of people how to use Zoom. Right, so a lot of people had never heard of what is Zoom or what is video conferencing for all the time. But this COVID-19 had taught a lot of people how to use communications through the web and all these things. So I look at the right side of it anyway. Right. So,
yes.
yeah. So there is also things like using cloud systems and all these things. So you have to touch a little bit on the Industrial 4.0, where cloud systems and all this. If you have cloud systems, you could actually work at home.
Yes.
So you will not be affected so much, you see. All right.
So you're saying to relook at operations to adopt technology, take this opportunity to become more lean and efficient.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Okay. So now, let's over to you, Mr. Lee.
Oh, okay. This I think the COVID-19 long holidays we are going through, a lot most SME business owners to rethink the way to move forward. Areas that we are looking at will definitely be supplement company income. Some of our members already reacted to look for businesses to supplement company income. They immediately go into like what the previous speaker says, selling masks.
Diversifying on the offerings, you mean?
Etc.
I see. But that may not be possible for all companies, right?
Yeah. But I think maybe they can look other ways to supplement company income.
That's a good idea, actually. So what about our learned colleague from across the causeway, Mr. Koh?
Okay, I think you know that Singapore government have been doing a lot in terms of make sure the economy will be still not disrupted too much. So I think government have, in fact, 4 or 5 years ago, I think we realized that I think the SME, in terms of productivity, they are not as good as compared with the big NMC. So actually, we have initiated a campaign called the Industry Transformation Map. That is, government is to encourage all these SME. And in fact, we have break this industry transformation map into 23 industry and cluster into 6 clusters. And hopefully that by clustering all this industry, I think they can have more efficiency in terms of the infrastructures, and hopefully they can share some common resources. I think this is one thing we have done 4 or 5 years ago. I think this COVID-19 actually should speed up these so-called programs further. And I think 2 years ago, we have promoting Industry 4.0 and come out some of these so-called best practice and framework to allow the manufacturing company in Singapore to adopt the best practices. And we also give, I think we have spent quite a fair bit of money in terms of getting the international consultant to come out a framework. So probably this is something I think we've done even before the COVID-19. I think we are trying to minimize the social impact. So I think, you know, like even we are trying to encourage the bank, you know, try to be more lenient in terms of supporting the industry, the SME especially. For instance, certain loan that you can actually, government give up to 90% of guarantees. So that will actually minimize the risk for the bank. And I think on the other side, I think a lot of these SME actually support a big NMC. I think big NMC, I think they are more robust in terms of the so-called resources, that include the finance. So I think the SME should work closely with all these NMC. And I think the NMC should also help this SME to make sure that they are able to tide over this period. Because what happens if after this COVID-19, if you don't have all these SME to support your operations, and you need to reconfigure your supply chain again, I think that's very painful. So I think the whole ecosystem actually have to help each other, right? Meaning the SME among themselves, they have to see how to help each other, and the big NMC will see that how can they help with the downstream supply chain to ensure that they will be intact as long as possible. So I think these are a few things that government is trying to do in terms of the enterprise and industry level. But I think we also look at in terms of all these self-employed people. I think self-employed people, I think during this period, I think they'll be very difficult also. So I think government is trying to fund them, make sure that they are able to ensure that, you know, your daily expenses and also the family, you know, will be intact. You know, I think so. I think so from social aspect, from the business aspect, and also from the national so-called agenda, that we know that things will come and go, but I think we have to really prepare ourselves. I think, you know, in Singapore we don't have resources. The only resources we have is manpower. So we have to ensure that our manpower are fully trained. So I give you an example. For instance, if you're SME, you can send your staff for maybe a couple of weeks of training, and government is actually giving fund. Even your staff are on training. So we want to ensure that during this period, the staff will be upskilled and upskilled in a way that they are able to sort of learn something new. So as you know, that after the COVID-19, the Industry 4.0 digital transformation will be a norm. So how can they embrace all this new business model? I think this is what I think our government is trying to do.
Thank you. So what we are hearing is that the companies are starting to implement more sanitizing SOP. Everyone is being more prudent with the cash flow, pay more attention to that. Because of the consumption behavior patterns are changing, people are starting to pay more attention to upskilling, training, preparing more content, and looking into lean management, improving productivity and efficiency, and supplementing companies' income with new diversified offerings, right? So these are all the things that the SMEs are doing for ourselves, aside from what government is doing respectively. So do you think these are trends that will continue post-COVID-19? Are these all just knee-jerk reactions that are just temporary? Are any of these survival measures actually feasible on the long run? Yeah, does this change the way process and the way business is done moving forward? Let's have a quick one because I can see questions coming in. Okay, Mr. Segal.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a paradigm shift in the way that we think and we operate. I mean, people are already working on how to do the cost cutting, how to use lesser manpower and more effectively, multitasking of the same people. So all these kind of training and thinking process has already started. And I think it's going to be a shift, not just for a few months post-COVID, it's going to be permanent. I mean, this is something, as was said, is a new normal. I mean, what is going to be happening? And very correctly, it's been said that this is the time to be adapting to changes, to go into a digital world, to go into a less expensive way of working. And also it's an opportunity. I mean, just as correctly said, I mean, it's an opportunity for Malaysia, for Singapore, for India, because a lot of people from the US and the European part are going to be shifting their bases, or they're not going to put all their eggs in the Chinese basket. So we are the ones who can gain, and this is the opportunity.
Very good. Mr. Tiong?
Okay, thank you, Datin. Okay, for the case of Malaysia, obviously, I think this trend, obviously, social distancing will surely be around. I don't think that this requirement for social distancing will go away after MCO. I think that will change the way how we are going to live, how we are going to work, I think, moving forward. So obviously, surely it's going to disrupt a lot of our what we call businesses. Those who are not able to do remote access, obviously they will have problem if they have not invested into IT infrastructure previously. So I have prepared some slide. Maybe I just continue with what I've done from here. Maybe can you see my slide, Datin?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think moving forward, I would say that companies should. It's the best time now, actually under this current environment, actually to do a self-assessment, or what I call a self-audit, or to do a little bit of forward planning, or some people call it a scenario planning, to see how internally, how is the leadership, is there anything that needs to be done, people, process, the resources, are they having in terms of financial resources, in terms of the infrastructure. I think it's time for them to take a stop and then to plan forward. And of course, also obviously the business model itself, whether the business model is still sustainable, do they have to change? How about their revenue streams? They have to look at different revenue streams right now, whether if they're only focusing on domestic market, do they need to look at export market? or do they need to consolidate? Let's say, for example, if they run into cash flow problem, if they cannot sustain a business, maybe they have to consolidate. They may have to go into a merger with another friendly companies, or to make it stronger. I think that's a way to go. I think for SME. Of course, if they can move on to this next step, so obviously then they can look into the area, like for example, how if the process is an issue, is how they can optimize the process. They can go into lean manufacturing. They can talk about 5S, and of course also to make their operation more efficient. Then they can look into talent. Obviously, talent is one area which is very important if they want to do any innovation, whatever, upskilling and reskilling of their people. If they want to do any Kaizen activities, obviously, talent is important. So next, obviously, technology. Of course, technology adoption, needless to say, because now we are talking about moving into digital economy. So obviously, digital transformation and connectivity with their upstream and downstream between their customer, as well as the connectivity to their suppliers, obviously will be very, very important in the future. So automation, of course, the IR 4.0 adoption will be very important moving forward. So I would say, just on behalf of the M&E Productive Nexus, because I'm very much involved in, because it was set up in 2017. The government, I think, is trying very much to approach SME, especially right now for this M&E segment, because there is this Productive Nexus we set up, because Productive Nexus set up because they actually want to put a focus on this segment. And of course, this Productive Nexus was set up actually to implement some intervention program. Of course, those who are not aware of it, of course, there are a lot of activities being planned, but I think some of the activities that you have seen recently because of this a lockdown was that this webinar, a series of webinars have been rolled out in the last 2 weeks. In fact, today itself, we had two of these webinar been held. And of course, I think I just briefly mentioned about this MPC. MPC has this what I call this assessment tool available for a long time, but actually they wanted SME to come forward and actually to do what they call assessment. But before this COVID, I think they are quite difficult for the government to reach out to our SMEs. So I would like to take this opportunity to urge everyone, if really you think that you will need help to look at assessment, I think they have these tools. One which look at quantitative in terms of your productivity, and the other one is more on qualitative. So when I say quantitative, basically you can go into looking into whether your sustainability of the business, whether how is your productivity versus your profitability, are you in which area, which segment of your business are you in, through this measurement, to assess this assessment. The other assessments which look into your more on qualitative, look into your leadership, it look into your operation, as well as talent, as well as your customer experience. So I think these are useful tools that is available in MPC website. Of course, you can also talk to the MPC officer. Okay, at the last I would like to share is this. In fact, this is what the MPC is rolling out. This is has been proven to be very successful in tourism industry. And this has been, I'm actually got the permission now to inform this, because they are only going to officially launch this tomorrow. It's called Machinery and Equipment Productive Nexus Virtual Advisory Clinic. So right now, what they intend to do is to give free clinic to companies, especially SME, who want to get advice from industry expertise, who have got certain relevance knowledge, to give them some advice on how they should, even to the extent to provide some kind of linkage to the necessary, what they call agencies in the government, to provide any help in terms of, let's say, for example, in terms of government subsidies or loan or grant or whatsoever. So I think SME should make use of this opportunity to take what they call to lock on to this, and of course register yourself, because I think they are only right now, I think, open to about 100 companies, and after that they will close the application, I think, until further notice. All right. So with that, I would like to share this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, wow, that is a really good teaser. Yeah. So there's an advisory clinic that will be launched tomorrow and only available for the first 100 Malaysian companies. So those of you who are here today, please, maybe this is your chance before other people hear about it. So next we have Mr. Tay. Any comments?
Well, basically, this trend, I mean, will continue on the post COVID-19, and definitely there'll be going to be a lot of developments along the line, because we can see that the next step is actually the only way is technology that can help revive the economy and all these things.
Mhm.
Because if the digitization, I mean, it's example like just a simple example, is that a lot of hawker stores says that being that we're talking about before the MCOs, a lot of hawker stores says, oh, my business is very bad and all these things. But the business of for hawker foods has been changed. Grab Food, Food Panda has actually business has increased more than what they have lost. So basically, business model has changed, right? People prefer to stay at home and eat or order in rather than going to the food court or to the coffee shop to eat and then come back home. You see, so we have to relook at basically after this post COVID-19. I mean, we should look at businesses as what we can say is what is your actual business model now? You will need to change your business models. It'll be different. I can see that video conferencing will be even more. It's going to happen more. People are going to cut a lot of traveling. Traveling expenses, they will cut down, right? Meeting people is so simple now, just like in Zoom. Like in Zoom now, we actually having meetings and seminars and forums in one. So this is going to help a lot of businesses to cut costs. Traveling, and also they are not subjected to, if let's say there's another virus attack or anything, at least people don't get this issue again, even with a pandemic and all this. So technology will pave a way for us to move on forward, you see. So that is, I mean, basically, I mean, but of course, it's not an immediate change. It will take years to change. But I mean, if you look at the China, when they started with e-wallet, I mean, nobody expected that within a few years, everything is e-wallet. If you don't have an e-wallet in China now, you don't get to eat. You're going to get to buy anything. So imagine the thing. I mean, if the thing is that all the business has to change as according to the environment and how people can adapt to the change. So if people can adapt to the change, I think more probably we can move forward very, very fast. Right. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Lee?
Yes, of course, the SME needs to adapt to any changes that come after the COVID-19. So for SME to survive, I think we can consider intercompany merger in order to face the greater challenges and to survive, especially in company revenue and profitability. So I think the intercompany mergers should be considered.
Mergers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. Mr. Koh, maybe you could share some of the current scenarios in Singapore. Do you see it continuing?
Okay, I think we have been talking about all this painful experience and also the disruption of business. I think we also don't forget that things will get over. So I want to share with you some of the toolkits that maybe allow SME to consider, because for any dark cloud behind there's a sun. So I think hopefully when the dark cloud over, how can we capitalize or how can we leverage on this? So I'd like to share some of the findings that we have, right? Okay, I think all the speakers have been talking about the existing problems. I think it will not go away. Maybe another 6 months to 12 months, or even more than that. But I think the company have to go on, right? Of course, some company will face a lot of disruption and probably they may not able to continue, but the rest of companies should be, life goes on. So I want to share some of the findings that we have after talking with some of the industry experts. So I think this is what's going to happen, right? So I think these are a few pointers I want to share, right? In a few slides, I will pick up some slide which is more relevant to all the speakers who are mentioning all this issue. So I think in terms of liquidity and cash flow, I think this is a big issue now. So just now I mentioned that you have to work with maybe your customer and your suppliers and see how can you all work together to tie over this difficult period. So one of the ways is probably you all can, trade some of your services, and even you have capacity, excess capacity, how can you repurpose and to turn into some other production, right? Which is currently needed. So when the times come back, you're able to carry on whatever you have. The human resource very important, right? You still need the human and all your staff, all your talents to make sure that when the things recover, your people are there to get on with the business. Supply chain, I think, is become very critical now. I think if you look at the current situations, the supply chain already disrupted, right? I think after the US-China trade war, it already started to broken down. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the Japan and US and Europe, they are actually subsidizing a lot of their company to move up their supply chain. So I think one of the benefit, one opportunity that Southeast Asia country or even India can capture is some of these supply chain will actually come back to ASEAN country or even the South Asia. So I think this is something that we can see. There's a hope, at the end of the tunnel. And I think COVID-19 actually is make a lot of changes. I think you will disrupt people's life, in terms of productions, in terms of services, is all affected. And the SME especially, you will take this period to actually relook into your cost point and also how you're going to serve the customer, how you're going to make use of technologies, to leverage on technologies, right, to ensure that you are able to engage with the customers. I think that we are more or less entering into the digital economy. Everybody will be using digital economy to do business or even entertainment, the supply chain, the whole ecosystem will be digitized, right? So I think we're going to see how to leverage on all this technology. I think a lot of this technology, I think in the past is only affordable by NMC, big company. But if you look at some of this technology, actually is affordable to SME, and SME should actually capitalize on them, right? To leverage on this technology and look at your business processes. How can you embed all this technology in your operations? So as I mentioned, I think Singapore has come out this industry transformation map, and we call it the Industry 4.0. So if you look at the Industry 3.0 and 4.0, there's a big difference, right? If you look at the 3.0, a lot of times you only look at your own productions, and you are not looking at the end-to-end. That was also because the technology don't allow that. But I think moving forward, the end-to-end digitization is the norm. So you have to start looking at your productions, even your manufacturing, how you digitize and link up with your suppliers and your customers, right? And how can you engage your customer in the more so-called a better experience using all the technology which is now available to SME as well. Actually, we come out Singapore have EDB have come out this so-called the Singapore Smart Industry Readiness Index. This is actually a self-assessment toolkit for all the SME, even the big company, they are adopting this framework. Right. If you look at this, they have three so-called three pillar, three building block process, technology, organization, 8 pillars, and 16 dimensions. You can actually use some of these guidelines to assess all your end-to-end operations, right? Our suggestion is actually you should look at organization first, because you have to look at, you must have enough, your leadership competency and also your workforce competency must be there, and you have a proper organization so-called structure. Then you look at your processes. Then you look at how the technology can improve all this. So I think this is what we actually try to give this model to our SME or even some of the mid-sized companies to do. So if you look at the Industry 4.0, this is the whole ecosystems. So if you look at this, I think in the past, it was actually very silo. But moving forward, I think the digital transformation will actually make all these ecosystem linkages all linked together, all digitized as much as possible. So probably this is one of the areas that they can look at. And in terms of the how you want to build, a better organization, these are the pointers we look at it. So I think for business SME, I think you can look at in future, probably you have to relook into your resource in terms of how you deploy your manpower. So I think these are some guidelines that I think can be used by SME, and in terms of also anticipate the trend and also the data to move your business forward. So I think in digital transformation, I think we are looking at 3 areas. One is how can you use your technology to improve your productivity and efficiency to cut costs, and the other area is how can you use even your technology to improve your revenue. Another one is maybe there's opportunity for you to look at new business and new product innovations, right? I think if you look at the ASEAN market is 650 billion, it's quite a sizable market. Can we develop some product just for ASEAN market? So SME can do innovation now at very low cost. And also you don't forget about some of these up and coming technology like 5G actually will disrupt and also reorganize all the ecosystem. So you have to probably see how to leverage on all this. And as I said, that I think the supply chain wise, I think in the past, SME, most of the time they are actually at the so-called the sub-assembly and also the low value manufacturing. So maybe now there's a chance by leveraging all this technology, they can actually push up the value chain, right? To do some more high value items or businesses or services. And I think the ASEAN can actually move forward with this kind of digital transformation plans.
Right.
And just to give you one example, for instance, the last one is the last slide.
Okay.
Actually, one of our members actually is during this period, it come out a new product. This product actually to replace the traditional clinical mask. So I think this is something that we find is interesting. So as I said, I think we are in the VUCA war. So how to make sure that we are not stuck with all these past issues. So we have to give to give the proper rethink in terms of how to meet the challenge, right? Right. So I think these are some of the pointers we can actually adopt by SME. Right, okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koh. So I think because we only have 15 minutes left, and I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in. Okay, the first, I think I can lump a few questions together. The bulk of the questions seem to be asking about how do SMEs actually afford to digitize the business, whether we should adopt more of the Industry 4.0 technologies or any kind of new technologies when we already are strapped for cash, and how does this translate to our human resource management? So maybe Mr. Tiong, automation.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. Since time is limited, I think I will just go straight to the answer. I think this question basically talk about, okay, when you're running short of cash. So obviously, I think first thing before you talk about automation, I think is to look at your process. I think this morning we have this webinar which we talk about lean manufacturing. I think I think if you look at your process, if you can be more lean, in fact, itself, you will be able to actually maybe find some cost saving somewhere before you talk about going into to automation or Industry 4. I think that just should be your first step. Of course, if you can, because if you go straight away to digitalization without having lean, then you actually will be investing something that is over your budget, because I think first is to remove your fat. So I would suggest look at your whole process, look at your whole operation first, how to make it more lean, unnecessary operation, even including your layout or you know, your process, how to reduce the time that you spend, let's say for example, from one process to the next process and things like that. Of course, digitalization can be in the form of just collecting data first, without talking about even, I'm not talking asking you to put robots, you know, look into how to, since you already, if you have some machine there, I think maybe if you're able to collect data, then I think data will be important for you to sort of analyze, and so that you know what area to improve. Okay, so in a way, if you can collect data, is a form of digitalization. Yeah, I hope I answered that.
Thank you. Now there is a question for Mr. Segal. Do you think that India has a strong advantage, given that you have a lot of ready employees and strong human resources?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just like Malaysia, India does have a good opportunity. One of the issues is we do have raw materials, we do have skilled labor, we have the infrastructure. But it's now a question of capacity building, and a lot more automation needs to be brought into India. And I think this is where Malaysia and India can tie up, because, we are good in the basic engineering, let's say, but for automation, robotics, and other things, yes, there are certain companies who are doing it, but the lean manufacturing processes have to be really built in and brought in. And I think this is where India lacks, but the opportunities definitely are there, because we already have companies from US and Europe, and especially those related in iron and steel and foundries and various machining process and pattern building and dice building workshops, who have approached Indian companies to shift their base or pass on the orders here. But I think a lot of technology, what you call upgradation and automation, needs to be done. That is what India lacks, and we need to work on that.
Right. Okay, so the next question is actually for Mr. Koh. There is a question asking, do you see Malaysia and Singapore, because we are just neighbors, do you see the SMEs in both countries joining forces to capitalize on the gap that the trade war between US and China seems to be creating?
Yeah, I think definitely Singapore and Malaysia's historically, I think we are linked. And in terms of ecosystems, I think we are quite connected. So I think after this COVID, I think we should actually look at both countries. What is our weakness and strengths? We should actually capitalize on the strength of each country. So definitely, I think, as I mentioned, that all these supply chain will be pulled out from China, right? And I think Malaysia is one of the country that more ready in terms of getting in all these manufacturing activities, because what you have is, I think you have a young workforce, and I think you also have a big lands, a lot of lands and all that, and also a lot of these natural resources. So I think if you look at all your natural resources, how can you make use of them and develop some new products? And of course, Singapore, we play a role in terms of we can maybe collaborate with you, right, in terms of some engineering and also maybe some design, the kind of thing. I think that Singapore has been all the while being a hub in terms of some of the designs which is based in Singapore. But I think, as I said, that we only have design capability, but we don't have enough capacity to manufacture it. So I think this is where I think Malaysia and Singapore can work together. So I think that a lot of Singapore SME or big local NMC, actually they have a lot of investment in Malaysia. So I think we should work further. I think After this COVID-19, I think we should work even closer. So I think, for instance, all the associations who should play a bridge in terms of how to link up all the members together to see how to capitalize this so-called market, which is, I say, the ASEAN is quite a big market. Of course, after that, you can look at the regional, even the global market together. Yeah,
right.
sure.
Thank you. So now there's a question on what does our panel think? Should companies with limited budget focus the budget more on digitizing the business or putting the money into sanitizing? Who wants to take this one? Mr. Segal.
Yeah, I think it's an equal share. Both are equally important. We are already getting digitized, let me tell you, because we are having webinars to train people on how to have the best effective, gadgets at home and how to protect it from virus attacks and stuff like that. And also, how do we upgrade to cloud and, then start operating from remote areas in future? So yes, both have. And sanitization is mandatory because otherwise the government won't let us run the factory, So that is how it is. Both have to be thought of.
Mr. Lee, what do you think? What would your members say? Which would they choose?
That's a tough question. But usually the traders will be, I think, more inclined to improving the business. So we probably will go more on the digitizing rather than the sanitizing. But I think at this point of time, both are more equally important. And we have to really
okay, Mr. Lee, I think you're getting cut off a little bit.
The sanitizing part of it and because my phone is running out of battery.
Okay, so while you get your phone charged, can we go to Mr. Teh?
Sure.
What is Pansia, Penang, our manufacturing stronghold? What are the Penang companies saying?
Well, actually, the first thing is both are, like everybody says, both are very important. Sanitization is important because it deals with life, right? And whereas business, it deals with money. So that's why you have to understand what you want first, which is more important, you see. So of course, both is also important. You need the money and you need life also. So, but digitization does not means that it's expensive. It's not. Right? People have to understand that, digitization is actually not expensive at all. I give you an example of e-commerce. If you go to like Singapore, we have Lazada and all this. I mean, to sell your products in Lazada, it's not expensive, right? So this is called digitalization. For example, like you can even go into cloud HR, right? Where you have an external HR system where you do a cloud HR, and the cloud HR is very cheap. It's even cheaper than you employ a HR guy. So all these things is not really that expensive, but just more important is understand what your company needs.
So
that is more important.
So it still comes back to the assessment, how lean you are, how efficient and how productive. So I think from all of you, you're saying that it doesn't have to be a scenario where you survive the virus and then you starve. It doesn't have to be that scenario. Is that what everyone is saying?
That's right.
Okay. Oh, I have a question. I'm wondering who should take this one. So the question is, how much do you think a company should spend on digitizing? How many % from the turnover? Mr. Tiong.
Since Mr. Koh did not answer the question earlier, why don't you ask Mr. Koh to answer this?
Mr. Koh?
Okay, I think in terms of how much to spend, I think that is actually secondary.
Yes.
First of all, like what Mr. Tiong said, I think you really need to look at your process. Sometimes by looking at your process, you can save a lot of cost. And this is one thing, right? if you want to spend budget on automations, you also need to prioritize. If you look at a whole manufacturing, from front to back, there are certain so-called critical area. When you automate it or when you digitize it, actually the impact is very, very big. And sometimes this may not need to spend a lot of money, right? So I think you need to do self-assessment, look at the processes, and also you have to make sure that one thing I think I like to mention is a lot of times I think SME, they buy technology. When there's a funding, things like that, they buy technology, but they forget that technology need to be maintained and operate and need to sustain the whole life cycles. Do your people ready to sustain this in terms of maintenance? Because if you do not have your internal capabilities to maintain this so-called automation system, it becomes even more expensive, right? So I think automation, whether I think for NMC, normally they will spend about 2 to 3% on top, in terms of the revenue, right? So I think there's a budget they allocated. For SME, I think you can actually look at your processes first, then also look at all the assets that you have. Are you actually maximize all these assets? Do you have idle asset? So certain thing is actually you don't need to own it. So for instance, you should adopt maybe a sharing economy concept, right? Certain thing that when you need it, right? Company will there be to support you in terms of, let's say, even manufacturing process or even making some fixture, things like that. You don't need to have to invest in your own CNC machine. Because CNC machine costs you $500,000 to 2-3 million. And that's very expensive. So if you're not using it all the time, I think you're losing money on that matters. Yeah.
Right. So we have a question here specifically for Mr. Tiong. Do you see competitors grouping together to move forward together, sleeping with the enemy?
Well, okay. I think among the what I call association, I think part of our, let's say I'm using MAT as an example.
Yes.
Part of our actually mission actually is to build a more cohesive. Of course, at the same time, we are actually mindful about this Anti-Competition Act. All right, but at the same time, I think we also trying to build a cohesive in a sense of course, where we are able to ride on each other's strength to actually go for. Sometimes we may have to collaborate to go for bigger projects, for example. I think this is definitely possible. Definitely possible through, for example, the association, because I think it's especially if they want to do something which is like I was told, like some of this company who wants to invest in Penang, I was told by one of the speakers earlier, they actually wanted what I call digital twin, and companies were able to provide a full thing, under digital twin environment, and they can't. Not a single company can do that, so they have to group together a few companies to do it. So all this is definitely possible in the future. I think no one single company can do everything. So I would say that possible, and we can be competitor at the same time, and can be friends at the other time. Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Now the next question is for Mr. Segal. Now India is a big producer of engineers. Do you believe that there are enough engineers out there to support Industry 4.0 if everyone moving forward begins to adopt Industry 4.0?
Yeah, for sure. The engineers, I mean, we have a lot of colleges, we have good engineers, who are trained. And unfortunately, because there was not so much of manufacturing focus, everyone got sucked into going into IT industry or going overseas for different assignments. And in fact, you'll get some of the best bankers who are engineers. There are people who have done engineering and then done their civil service and joined the government. So I think there's a lot of scope. And as you know, India had roughly 25% of our merchandise exports is all engineering, and we think because this coming year, the demand for gems, jewelry, apparel, clothings, and all might go down. So there is a scope for the engineering goods to go up to 30% of the Indian merchandise exports. And The opportunity is there. We have people, we have everything. But as I said, we need more technology and we need more foreign direct investment to come in, and we do expect them to come.
Thank you. Now, there seems to be a few questions on the same issue. How is it possible for SMEs who are not even at Industry 3.0 or having proper processes, how do they catch up with the train of Industry 4.0? And how do we do this affordably, given that everyone now is cash strapped? Now, which one of you gentlemen wants to take this tough one? Automation, Mr. Tiong.
Okay, I would say that obviously this is always a difficult question, I think, for those companies who are cash strapped. So I think as I just want to carry on what actually Mr. Koh has mentioned just now about actually, first I think is to look into, that's why this morning one of the speakers talked about this lean manufacturing. I think just through lean manufacturing, I'm talking about they are looking at their whole process. They are able to reduce from 26 people just to 7 people. So I think these are all possible. So which means even before you talk about automation, right? So maybe it's just about maybe rearrangement, another layout, reduce a lot of this movement of people, unnecessary movement. So all this is by itself through this saving. Then I think the next step obviously is you look at where I think automation should be applied into, I would say that there are a lot of low-hanging fruits.
Yes.
Low-hanging fruits area, I would say the most simplest area I see is in Malaysia is we employ a lot of people to do manual inspection. For example, inspect products and before they are being packed and all that. So because now we have machine vision, which is so affordable, yeah, and you can do at very high speed. So I think it should replace this. Don't use human being to do this simple inspection job. And another simple job is like what I call pick and place. There are a lot of pick and place where they employ a lot of people to do pick and place, like at the final packing area in a rubber glove, for example. So I think so these are places where you can actually put a robot these days. I think price has come down. So I think it is possible to use robot to do all these very simple job. And of course, I think as long as I would say that if the ROI, you can justify the ROI, if you can achieve a payback within 3 years, I think it's a good investment. That's my yardstick is, if you can get a payback within 3 years, even though it may be costly initially, but I think that you should go ahead. Because I think long term, because we are not just talking about the 3 years and you get a payback. I think long term that will allow you to move on to to become a bigger company, or even go on to do something which you are not able to do when you are all still very manual.
Right.
Right.
So, Mr. Lee, sorry, but wow, questions are really flooding in last minute, normal. Mr. Lee, question for you. For merchants, machinery merchants, how do we ensure that we are still part of the supply chain without being eliminated? Mr. Lee? Oh dear, I think he freezed. Okay, anyone else want to take this question? How do the machinery merchants remain competitive? Or we move on to the next question. Is Mr. Lee here? Okay, I think our timing is up. So, okay, can we do this? Because questions are still coming in. Can we send out, we'll send out an email, compile all these questions, send out an email to our panel, and we will post this on the website. So anyone who has posted a question can come and check on the answers. Can we agree to do that? Because it's still coming in, and as normal, Malaysians are late. So is everyone agreeable to that?
Yeah, that's
right?
perfect.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think in summation, the bulk of the problem seems to be cash flow, and what do they do with the staff, and how do they actually adopt technology despite having no cash flow, right? So I think the bulk of the questions seem to be relating to that. And of course, how to remain competitive. The questions they're asking about what the government can do more, I think that we'll leave that to another platform, right? So yes, since our time is up, I'd like to thank our panel of experts who are with us today. Thank you very much for your insights. I wish I had done a better job to navigate this, but we'll have this again. We'll have the same talk, and I will send the questions so you can answer and we can post it all out, right? To all our attendees, thank you for joining us. Please continue to post your questions. We will actually look into it, get the answers up, and we'll post it up and circulate it, right? Thank you very much. So the Mandarin session of this topic will be happening on the 30th of April, 11 a.m. Malaysia time. And our next webinar is a technical one, the immediate future role of Industry 4.0 in economic recovery. Mandarin session is on the 5th of May, 11, and the English session is on the 6th of May at 9 p.m. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.